Hey.
Hello. How are you? Karen, how are you?
Hi, Gary Fowler.
Hi, Gary. Nice to see you again. Hi,
Gary.
Lenny. How are you? We just said hi.
Good to see you guys. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thanks for coming.
Governor
Great.
Mike Farrell.
Hi.
I'm the town administrator. This is
Wonderful.
Joe Bonavita, the
Hi.
chairman of the
How are
board
you?
of
Hi,
selectmen.
John. Nice to see you,
Good to see you.
too.
Gary's
Yes.
one of our selectmen
Yes,
as well.
he is. Yes, great. Hi.
Fred Mitchell, Fire Chief.
Hi,
Nice
thank
to
you,
meet
Fire
you.
Chief. How are you? How's everybody today? Good. Thank you. Good. Nice to see everybody.
A large part of our town hall staff here to contribute and listen to you.
Well, that's terrific.
Would you like to have a seat?
I'm happy to, and thank you. Would you like to join?
Yes, we're going to join you. Absolutely. Yep. Okay.
You want to go?
No, you go right there.
Okay.
That's fine.
We'll move up so you guys don't feel.
Okay, that's great.
Great.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. We appreciate that.
John, you want to join us?
It's like sitting in the front row at church, right?
That guy's always on a white shirt and tie. I don't know what happened to him.
It's dressed down Thursday.
He's
Only
always
one
dressed
better
up.
place, right? The State House says dressed down Wednesday.
You don't even want to get on that path.
Exactly.
Well, Lieutenant Governor, I'd like to, on behalf of the town of Georgetown, welcome you here. We're glad that you decided to stop by and talk about the community compact. We've been a recipient now. This is our second grant. We participated in the first year. We had a long-range budgeting grant that we took advantage of. And this time around, the selectmen decided to adopt the engagement and transparency best practice. And what we've done, what we're in the process of doing is utilizing a cloud-based open checkbook and open budget. I was explaining to Senator and Representative, we're having our first budget meeting of the season this Saturday. Everybody's, we're doing a budget without paper. We normally had a 3 or 4 inch binder,
That's great.
and the budget's going to be on that screen behind you for the budget
great.
for the budget committee and on their laptops. So it's all new to a lot of us, especially the volunteers on the committee. But our department heads have been working over the last month getting used to it and actually inputting their budget numbers into it. Before that, we just used Excel spreadsheets. It was 43 spreadsheets tied together, and anytime you made one change, the whole thing could go wrong, and often did. But this has been working out quite well so far, and we're looking forward to getting even better at it.
So that is, you make it sound so easy. There's nothing easy about making that transition at all. But I'm really happy that you chose that as a best practice. It's the second round. Every community in our Commonwealth, all 351, signed up for a compact to study some best practice of their choosing. And when we started this 4 years ago, didn't know how that would go. And a voluntary program offering up a range of ideas was very well received from municipal officials. And oftentimes it was all about a subject area that they just wanted to get to, but just didn't have enough resources and bandwidth locally to be able to do. So the compact provided both resources to either hire a third party to come in and help you with that, or resources through state government and technical assistance to help you adopt that best practice locally. So we've done this in every community of the Commonwealth, and now 90 communities have signed up for a second round of best practices to focus on. So you can see that it's a program that is supported by our legislature and is obviously benefiting local government to work on things that matter to your community. Every compact is different. There's so many different areas that we're studying together and funding together. So on this this budget, it's open budget and it's open checkbook, right? So open budget had to require not only the new technology to come in and be infiltrated throughout your government, but also training. So was there a number of trainings that had to take place with your local team here to understand how to utilize it?
Yes, we have. We didn't, to be honest with you, the first time that the Budget Committee is going to really,
It's going to be hands-on training.
yeah, they're going to see it for really the first time tomorrow morning. Saturday morning.
Well, timing. This is perfect timing.
Yeah, that's going to be their training. Although the LtGov that the vendor that produces this type of software, they provide, especially with the department heads, we have video training.
Oh, good.
And if they have, if anybody has a problem, they just can pick up the phone or email. We have a success manager, and they've been working very diligently this week with us, straightening out any and helping the department heads become used to the program.
So the open checkbook part of the program allows for your constituency, the taxpayers and residents of the community, to better understand how the budget is prioritized and where their tax dollars go in terms of service that impact their quality of life. Have you had any input from residents of the community around the open checkbook part?
Not yet. We're just in the process of rolling that out. We wanted to get the budget module going first, and that's going to allow the citizens to see how their money is allocated. And then the open checkbook, it looks just like a checkbook register. Everybody in their at their kitchen table sits down to balance once a month. It just has the date, the name of the person that's the check is paid out to, the date, and the amount, and the type of expenditure. And they'll be able to search and sort things by those different. They'll be able to see. They'll say, "Show me all the National Grid checks that were written that month," and they'll be able to total them and see how much we spent on electricity or gas. So Selectman Dawes.
Thank you. Welcome. We're talking about the exciting day you're going to have on Saturday when your budget goes paperless.
It's been exciting all week.
I'm sure. I think it's terrific, and that we could provide some seed dollars to have that adopted in the community,
Right.
but it was your choice to want to do that and to have an open checkbook for the community to better understand how their tax dollars are being used and to be more engaged in the process.
It should help.
Which it's terrific. And I think
Thank you.
in the first round of best practices, you chose some long-range planning and forecasting.
That's right.
And how did that help you as a community?
Well, it was a wake-up call,
Okay.
because you look 10 years down the road, and what it told us was if we don't do something now, we're going to be in deep trouble later. because we're staring at chronic deficits. So, and there's no easy solutions there.
Well, there's certainly, as a smaller community, you have mostly residential taxpayers that are contributing the tax dollars to operate your budget, and so that definitely is challenging. The opportunity to bring in more diversity into your tax revenue stream is perhaps limited, although it's important to look for those opportunities, whether it's downtown or sites that could be developed for commercial or industrial uses to bring in a broader base of taxes. That's probably more limited in a smaller community. But it's also important to do two things. Be as efficient as you can with the services that you do deliver, and that's where your team comes in. Find opportunities to share services with other communities that are nearby, if there are opportunities to find a common area of service that you can achieve a savings in by consolidating some of the administrative costs to deliver that service. And that's also a best practice that a lot of communities your size are looking for. And also to have a reliable partner in state government. A lot of what you do doesn't all fall on your shoulders. The state has to be a reliable partner to help you fund your budget, whether it's local aid, school aid, and the other cherry sheet categories that you look at when our budget starts to materialize. We just filed, the governor and I and our administration filed our budget and have focused on a number of priorities in terms of our state spending that will definitely have an impact on this region and your community in a good way. The one area that I'd like to focus on is education. It's important to every community, and the quality of the schools that exist everywhere in the state are critical, not only because we've ranked the best schools in the nation, but they have to be number one for every student in every school district in every community. And the reason is obvious. You look at an economy like ours in Massachusetts, the reason why it is growing and succeeding is because of the talent that we have in Massachusetts, and that talent comes directly from our schools in our state. We've invested a lot of funds into vocational and career technical school. That's become a very powerful source of skill development. So, for instance, we put $50 million over the past 4 years of workplace equipment like CNC machines, 3D printers into the classroom so that kids can develop the skills with hands-on learning experiences and graduate either directly into a good paying job in the region or take credits that can be forwarded into community college or any state college for an affordable 2-year or 4-year degree. And you'll see us continue to make those investments. But the core piece of funding is your Chapter 70 formula. And if many of you were around in municipal government 25 years ago, you remember Massachusetts did something very bold and passed what was called education reform. And it was in 1993. And it was really important that we did that because our schools weren't the best then. And there were too many kids falling through the cracks, not graduating, being socially promoted. And we needed to reform the system to make it more accountable, to raise the standards so that kids were promoting with proficiency to the next grade level, and to make a commitment, state makes a commitment to local government that we're going to share the responsibility of funding public education. And 25 years later, we're tops in the nation, first in class, but it needs to feel first class for every student. And what we have seen over the course of time are some gaps. Skills gap, I just talked about that a little bit. Achievement gaps with more diversity in our demographics, English language learners, and poverty. That has to factor into a formula. And then costs. As a community, you're wrestling with higher costs all the time, whether it's healthcare, salaries, pensions being some of the top areas that take a chunk out of your budget. So we, when we put our budget together, fully funded the Foundation Budget Review Commission's recommendations around special education, healthcare costs, English language learners, and the low-income factor. And our budget is added $200 million more in Chapter 70 aid over last year's budget, which will then be distributed to our communities. And over the next 5 to 7 years, you'll see a $3 billion commitment to public education, K through 12, a shared commitment between state and local government. So a big step forward. I really do believe this is the year for all of us to work together around adjusting that funding formula for our school districts and our municipalities. That's where sometimes the struggle becomes internal in a community when you're trying to figure out how am I going to fund police and fire services and highway and public health and our schools all at the same time. So you do need to have a strong relationship with state government, and we need to live up to our end of the bargain. So I do believe that as local officials and as state officials, we need to work together and make the education reform piece of today a reality as the next state budget is finalized for July 1st. Does anyone have any feedback on that? You might want to add to that. You hear this a lot from local officials.
Well, it's interesting. The first thing I'd say is we have a great dialogue with the Board of Selectmen and the town administrator here. There's a good partnership, and we feel like we get a lot of feedback. And from my perspective, Georgetown it really has two big issues that it's wrestling with. One is trying to diversify the tax base, which you referenced, and actually we've been helpful in the budget trying to give some money for technical assistance and things of that nature. And the town is really working hard to figure out how to maximize the opportunity for economic development, knowing that absent that, it's going to be very hard, as Mike mentioned, to try to fund its obligations in the future. And then the second really important thing is the educational system, because this is a standalone school district. And so trying to manage that with a town this size is a huge challenge. And so as we navigate the changes, and both Lenny and I have said to the board, we really have to work together to make sure that as we take advantage of what is clearly a lot of momentum this year around education reform and funding reform, that we encompass the school districts like this one that really don't have a huge base, have declining enrollment, and are trying to figure out how to navigate things like increased special ed costs, which the legislation that you all filed will do. So we've got a lot of challenges, and in many ways, Georgetown is symbolic of some of those big challenges that other similar communities are facing of its size all across the state. And so there have been some very difficult budget discussions over the last 4 or 5 years in the community, but everybody's committed to trying to get to a good place and a place of sustainability. And this board and this administrator have really worked hard at that, and have even at one point had an economic development sort of subcommittee or task force to look at that. So we need that continued partnership, and it may come down the line in the future that we may be looking at the potential for some MassWorks grants for infrastructure to bring to fruition some of the economic development, but there's definitely a lot of things moving in this community that depend on the partnership that you described. So it's really important that you're here, and thank you.
There was a regionalization grant that was awarded to a number of communities, including Georgetown, through Merrimack Valley Means Business. And was anyone here part of that effort to give input on the regional economic development plan? And does any of that pertain to some opportunities that you might like to highlight or discuss with me today?
Well, John Cashel is our planner and our rep to Merrimack Valley Planning Commission.
Okay.
And he's been actively involved in that. John?
Yeah, so the most important feature of economic development in Georgetown right now is to focus in on exit 54 off of 95. That's our industrial zone and our marijuana business overlay zone. And we've had a lot of attention over the last few months in regard to the marijuana industry. really wanted to locate and set up shop in Georgetown. I think one of the most important aspects of this new beginning for this industry that's blossoming in Massachusetts is that the state recognized the importance for host communities to maintain that host community structure. I know nobody likes the host agreement type of designation, but it really means a lot at the local level as far as us being able to produce the revenue we need. It's truly important. I mean, we are on our own as a small community.
Right.
Everybody in the panel realizes that. We're operating annually on a razor-thin margin relative to producing the amount of revenue we need to meet our expenditure needs. And, we do have an opportunity right now with this emerging industry to actually, hopefully provide in the next few years a good economic base for ourselves. And not to put aside everything else, we're trying
Just
everything.
even on that end, though, for a community like yours, smaller, to think about how to utilize this area, exit right off of 95 for that purpose, and to set up a zone and the opportunity to exist is creative and hard to do at the same time. So
You really can't underestimate what is actually going on. It's just there's a lot of interest in that particular exit off the highway. And, we had Healthy Farms there as the first medicinal
Right.
business of its kind in this area. And, they've done really well, and the town's worked really well with them. And, from that beginning, there's a lot of economic development potential for that industry in that particular area of town.
how much acreage is zoned for this purpose?
Well, it's a stretch that is a mile long, 1,000 feet deep from the center of I-95. So that's our overlay district.
Yeah, all right. And there are a number of property owners within that district.
Yeah. But, there was a lot of vacant land for sale for many years along Tenney Street, Jewett Street. And all of a sudden, a lot of that property has been transacted lately. And a lot of existing buildings are being transformed into, business uses. We have a number of varying businesses related to the marijuana business enterprises that are locating in Georgetown. So it's important.
And did that come out of the Regional Economic Development Plan?
No.
That was
No, it's a spin-off because of the emergence of this law and, everything's being put in place. And
But you were able to designate in your community the right place for it, so that
Right.
it wouldn't end up in a place that perhaps was not desirable to your overall master plan.
Yeah, and it was passed at the last annual town meeting, and it is isolated pretty much from all of the residential areas of town, for the most part.
I see also that you did a Complete Streets
Yeah.
program. Being part of the Complete Streets is not an easy designation to obtain either. So whoever within municipal government here started down that process takes multiple steps and.
Yeah, Doug Dawes introduced me to, when I became the town planner a couple years
Do you
ago.
get credit for this too?
No, I want to give credit to Doug Dawes because he came into my office and really, pressed upon me that was a priority for this community to become a Complete Streets program community. And,
Actually,
and Pete Durkee.
Peter Durkee, our highway surveyor, our elected highway surveyor. Peter was in the forefront in getting the Complete Streets up and running.
So does that lead to any, I know sometimes Complete Streets is used for more walkability, accessibility in an area where you're trying to tie different uses together.
Mhm.
Is there?
There's
was
been a
there
lot of studies,
Okay.
and we're working toward getting some money to do the areas downtown to make it more accessible to, the people that are walking around, so.
So we have a program that And actually, today I'm making some announcements around downtown development initiatives, where there are small grants to a community to think or rethink what could possibly be in your downtown to increase economic activity. That might be an opportunity, and we've requested additional funds in the budget. That's before the legislature now for this initiative, but that might be something that we could follow up on as the next step to, now that you have complete streets in place.
I do want to thank the state government, because you did provide for us, through the efforts of Bruce and Lenny, a $50,000 grant. And the Economic Development Committee, working with the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board, decided as a priority for us to put that money to work. And we're about to finish up on a wastewater feasibility study.
Fantastic.
For the downtown area.
Great.
So we're going to get that final report at the end of this month.
Okay. Great. When you do,
Excuse me.
it'll better inform you about what some economic opportunities are.
Yeah, then we're going to come to the state for more money so we can.
Usually the MassWorks program is a good next step
Yeah.
for infrastructure. And when you think about the MassWorks program,
Yeah.
we always like to tie it to job growth, economic growth in your community. Could be some housing of your choice in an area that can create a density that then would require more restaurants, services, shops, entertainment. But it has to be in concert with the character of your community and what you're looking for. And a lot of times it's that infrastructure money, the water, the sewer, the road network, sidewalks that's needed in order to attract a private investor. So
Georgetown's fortunate. It does have a municipal water system distributing water throughout the community. We don't have any sewer, though. So in order to advance and enhance our downtown area,
we will need that.
we need storage.
Yes.
So it's
All right, we look forward to working with you on that. Thanks for getting the ball going on that.
So, Lieutenant Governor, no problem. So, as Mike said, first of all, thank you very much for taking the time to come up today. So, Georgetown being a small town as we are, we have, even within the Board of Selectmen, we have some small battles that we go through in terms of how we allocate, funds into different areas, and we're always trying to, kind of address, different departments, what their needs are on an ongoing basis. Back to education, though, I'm certainly, that's why it's top of mind for me. And, education, though, as we were talking about before you got here, is kind of a broad spectrum, these days. The town has done a wonderful job over the past, 4, 5, 6 years. We built a new school for our children here, to give them, the best that we can. To further them to get to a level, where they can be self-sufficient, further selectmen or town governments or whatever. But one of the things that we have really focused on since then is really the protection of the citizens here in this community, specifically the kids. As we know, opioids have become a real problem, statewide and nationwide. Selectman Dawes has done a fantastic job working with different facilities that want to come into Georgetown. We have a Georgetown Cares program that really educates our children to the effects of the dangers of opioids. So as we look at funding education, I would hope that that is part of those discussions, okay? Because we can't educate kids if they're not going down the right path and avoiding those temptations, I'll call them. Georgetown has done a great job. The selectmen have come together along with, other departments in the town. We now have 2 SROs in the town, one in our grammar school, one in our middle high school, because we do actually value that greatly to the kids and their protection, not only with opioids, but the dangers of guns and certain things that have happened nationwide, unfortunately. So as you do talk about education, I would hope that these kinds of discussions continue so that we can continue funding different programs within Georgetown and other areas that protect our kids, because if we're not protecting them first, education's a far second.
Right. Very, very well stated, and thank you for your efforts locally. There's no community that isn't touched by this epidemic. It's a challenge for everyone. We, in this Commonwealth, however, have been leader in planning to combat the epidemic. I want to give credit to Governor Baker for really personalizing the issue and taking it head on. And with our legislature, we were able to pass 2 sets of laws around, first of all, prevention, intervention, treatment, and recovery. If you think about the epidemic and the plan in that context. Just on this most recent budget, there's a couple of specific things I'd like to highlight because it goes to the issue of mental health, which is sometimes it works in relation to addiction. And one of the things that the superintendents of schools brought to our attention when we were studying how to better secure school districts in the aftermath of some significant tragedies around shootings, we learned from them that while it's important that we put all the hardware in place to securitize a building, we need to also think about more social workers and resource officers within the buildings to help detect a student's needs for services. And the earlier on that we can intervene and help them with treatments and therapies and support, the better off they will be. And so in our budget, we did put specific dollars in categories for that purpose. More social workers in our schools, and more resource officers in our schools, and also the physical stuff that's needed to update buildings for security purposes. So that is, in a way, related to addiction treatment that's also needed. We have been very intentional, and I think everyone in this room agrees, that the way we speak about addiction has changed a lot over the course of the last 4 or 5 years. We speak about it as we rightfully should, as a public health issue. This is a public health epidemic. It is not a character flaw for someone to be addicted to a drug. Many of these addictions started innocently with a medicine that was prescribed for a health condition. And that's how much of this began. So in our first round of law changes that we made, we went right after the prescribers and said, stop prescribing, start over-prescribing, and limited the scripts to 7 days. We now have a system where any prescriber that does prepare to offer someone medicine to manage their pain, they have to log it into a monitoring system. And we're moving to all electronic scripts now. There will be nothing in paper anymore. And it reduces the ability for a patient to shop around to add up the number of pills that they might want for pain management or to beat an addiction. That's just an example of a segment of the work that we're doing. We also have put hundreds of millions of dollars with the support of the legislature into treatment, long-term treatment, and now aftercare, recovery coaches, because once you're treated for your addiction, it doesn't go back to the way it was. You live a life with this addiction and need to have access to services and support throughout the journey. And we put in our budget a tax against the opiate manufacturers at the wholesale level. And that tax dollar will go toward treatment services in the Commonwealth. And we feel that the makers of these opiates must play a role in the solution and the treatment that's needed for too many people affected. So that just gives you a few areas, and there's so many more that we can partner on, but we just want to thank you for doing your part to help as well.
Well, sure. There is one other area that I know is near and dear to, I know myself and Selectman Dawes' heart, and we've actually talked with Senator Tarr and Representative Mira about this as well. So as discussed here in Georgetown, we do have opportunities within the marijuana industry to collect host agreement funds and so forth and so on. But there are restrictions on these funds. And the Department of Revenue has kind of directed us, to a point where these funds belong, not so much in separate accounts, but within our budgets. But again, there are restrictions that we're kind of wrestling with. Okay, one of the areas that I would like to see, that kind of that person kind of loosen up a little bit, is the ability for a town that does have this opportunity put towards, say, after-school programs, facilities. Right now, I know Senator Tarr, Representative Marino, they've talked to Carol Jacobs, our superintendent, about a possibility that we have a rec center here in town that gives the kids the ability to go somewhere after school rather than, say, do other things that they might get in trouble with. So what I would like to ask our legislature is to address this so that the town of Georgetown can utilize some of these funds for the likes of a rec center or possibility of some, I know basketball courts are in discussions now, or things like that, so that it's not so much all the time education. It's maybe giving the opportunity for these children and young adults, I'll say, to actually go out and utilize their time a different way than, say, doing something else on the street, or going somewhere after school where they shouldn't be, or whatever it is. That rec center will also give them the ability to learn, different aspects of industry, and I know Carol has a lot of thoughts on that. So it's not some place that's just going to go and play video games, but it's going to be somewhat educational as well. And I think it can be a real value to a town like Georgetown. So I would ask our legislature to look at that as a possibility so that the town can utilize some of these funds to really implement such a great service for our citizens.
Do you want to add to that?
So we've actually had a chance to get a preview of what the facility might look like over at the school building, to look at the space with Carol. And it's definitely something that we think is a good idea. And again, this is another one of those things where, for a community of this size, it's hard to fund it on your own unless you have some assistance. So we're trying to look at the host agreements and see just how much we can widen that lane to maybe allow some of those funds to go into that purpose. And one of the questions is, do we try to do it as an overall change to the general laws, or do we try to do it as a home rule to say, well, in this specific instance, let's modify the agreement? So we're still looking at that issue.
Have you made a request for a ruling from the Department of Revenue, or some guidance from the Department of Revenue?
I think we have.
Okay, and do you have a response?
Have we made it direct?
Okay.
Not specific to a youth center or, but
No, in terms of the guidance around the use of funds associated with the host agreement?
no. The only thing we had some back and forth conversations. All we got from the DOR is everything goes in the general fund, period. We can't, once it goes in the general fund, then we can.
You can.
Obviously, but then once it's in that money, it loses its purpose, and it's just wide open for health insurance, debt payments. Once it goes in that pot, it never comes back.
Okay.
So that may be an area where we collectively might be able to help with some technical assistance to see how to navigate that, to see if there's a way that you can deposit into the general fund and then separate it out into a trust fund, perhaps. So we should talk about that.
Yeah, which is, I think, how we had set up originally, but then the DOR directed it differently. So,
Right.
Lieutenant Governor, I apologize, Senator, Representative Mayor. My fatherly duties have to come on. My kids are getting out of school, so I have to pick them up.
Completely
Okay.
get that.
Thank you so much again
Thank
for coming out. We certainly appreciate everybody's attendance. Okay, hopefully we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. See you.
And it's an opportunity for me, and I know Senator and Representative, to say thank you to you. Both the governor and I started our public service as selectmen in our respective hometowns, and we value both the electeds and the public servants at the municipal level and what you do. And when we started our service in our first term, we were very intentional about our work with municipal officials, because our thinking is we can build strong community, we'll build a stronger Commonwealth. And it was clearly through the grassroots and the work of local officials and local government that we are achieving a better and stronger Commonwealth everywhere. And that's really important to me, especially given that I'm not from Boston. I'm from the central part of the state. And it's really important that all regions of our state feel like they are on a path to seeing more opportunity. And the whole reasoning behind the compact was to help, first of all, develop a relationship, get to know one another, and so that if something happens, either a crisis or an opportunity, there's a familiarity with the team on the other side to be able to say, okay, this is something we'd like to talk about. Let's talk. We were just in North Andover with Andrew Mailer, the town manager there, and never a truer point to make than when on September 13th, when the explosions occurred in Lawrence, North Andover, and Andover. We were familiar with each other. We knew the managers. We knew the mayor. We'd been working together on a whole number of things. So when that terrible situation occurred, when we met up that night, it wasn't about, hi, how are you, and building a level of trust. We were way over that. And it was about, okay, let's put our plan together, let's work together, and we will get through this together. And so being able to come now after a re-election with 4 more years to work on this with you. I'm so grateful for the honor to be able to serve with all of you. And the purpose of coming is to do literally a check-in. There's no agenda. It's just a check-in to see how you're doing. Are the things that we've been working on working to your expectation? And more so, what's next? What's next? And you've already given me a few ideas to work on with my colleagues and with you. And a lot of it is, you've got a leadership team, you've got the people, you're doing your planning, and now you want to take the next step, because if we can share some resources with you on infrastructure, you might be able to attract the kind of private investment that you need to make certain things happen in your community. So I just want to commend you. I want to thank you. This is really important work. It's hard work. What you're about to do Saturday by putting your budget up here and painfully going through every dollar and cent, literally, with your department heads. It's really hard work, but the people in this community depend on you to do it, and I just simply wanted to come to say you're not in it alone, that we do this together. It's a team effort. So anything you'd like to add, Representative?
I'll just say that community compact to me reflects what a lot of people, a lot of voters and constituents have always asked for, just improved efficiency and cooperation among the various levels of government. Community compact does exactly that. It improves the communications between state and local government, works on best practices that we can all adopt. It doesn't just happen by itself either. It's not like we just voted into law and it happens. It takes a lot of diligence and hard work. And thankfully, we have an administration that's not afraid of hard work. Very few people can say that they've visited every single town in Massachusetts, 351 cities and towns, and we have a lieutenant governor that did exactly that. And it's for that ultimate goal, to improve efficiencies and make state and local government work better together. This is a job that we enjoy having, and I love working with town administrators, especially with people in a town that's very well run like Georgetown, and working with people like Peter Durkee and the Board of Selectmen. It's a pleasure to do.
Thank you. Anything you'd like to add?
I would just, again, thank you for coming back to Georgetown. It's good to see you here. That the administration that you're a part of has been great at these community things and partnering, and it has been great. You've talked about a lot of things. When you say what's next, I think the man sitting right over there represents what perhaps is part of our next large hurdle also here at Georgetown. I mean, I like to think in not problems, you mentioned earlier, solutions. We have to look for solutions. Solutions are tough. In the budget, we're meeting the next coming Wednesday. Selectmen and Finance are meeting to try to go forward. The state, in partnership, did the long-range planning, which we did. We called it the Abrams Plan. But probably even more eye-opening than that was recently when Moody's dropped our bond rating a little bit. That's even more eye-opening, and we really have got together trying to work with the finance and advisory in town, how we save, how we build our stabilization fund, how we can build our capital fund. OPEC is another thing that needs support, but and I think we'll come to those solutions. I think the next big hurdle, how we can partner, but is we're going to probably be going from a part-time, I've heard many different things, volunteer, per diem, fire department, trying to get now to move into a full-time, which many small towns like ours, I think, are also struggling with, because we just don't have the facility to house people and things of that, and there's more for the safety of the fire department as well as the citizens. There's a lot going forward. That has changed over the years, and I think for our citizens to open their eyes and to know what those changes are. I've talked with the chief. It's not just the volunteer fire department coming down the road and a guy hopping on the back of a truck and going to the fire. We now have a operating ambulance service in town, and so there's a lot of challenges there for us, I think, going forward. That's one of our largest. Well, if I could just speak on that. But again, I just thank you. I mean, this community compact and all of these partnering things, I think have been great, and it's good to see someone from the State House out here saying hello to the citizens.
Thank you for recognizing the chief, and maybe you want to amplify some of what the selectmen said.
Like Carl said, is the fire service has grown. It continued to evolve. Fire prevention and EMS is at the forefront right now. Our incident responses are up, but our fires are down because of fire prevention. We're doing more pre-hospital care, in the street, and then stabilizing, then going to the hospitals with patients. And just the requirements for somebody that wants to come on board and be part of the fire department nowadays. You're asking them to basically give up about 32, call it a year of your life, between training at the fire academy for the level 1-2 program, and then 16 weeks for EMT. So between those two classes, that's 32 weeks. And then when you bring somebody on board, the orientation into the department is a year. So if you're asking someone that has a full-time job, has a wife and a family, and has those family commitments, they're being pulled in a lot of different directions, and that's the commitment. It's not like 30-plus years ago when I started at 16. I showed up at the fire station, they trained me, I got on the back of the fire truck, and we went out the door. It doesn't work that way anymore. And also from that standpoint, it's not cheap to run a fire department nowadays, and it just the cost of running the fire department, because with all the mandates, continue to incur additional costs, and especially with the OSHA law that was just adopted effective February 1st. That as one of the fire chiefs in the state are wrestling to get our arms around. And as Selectman Fowle also elaborated on, is our facility. And, between myself and the police department, the lieutenant could probably speak on his end, we need more space. And we know in the next couple of years we really need to look at that building to expand it, to meet the needs of providing public safety for our community.
Is it hard to attract individuals to the fire service? Is that a challenge that you have?
At times it comes in a few will come in, and sometimes, when you tell them, look, you got to go become an EMT first before we'll even consider taking you on, because we have our in-house program, which is a very good program, and then just to get them up to speed, and then we'll send them to the fire academy with the call valve program. But those programs are at night, 2 nights a week. As an example, the fire academy, 16 weeks, 2 nights a week, and either a Saturday or a Sunday for someone who's working 40 hours a week with their family, as I said, and it's a lot on the demands.
Is that true on the police side as well?
Absolutely. What we've found is we've been training a lot of part-time employees to come in, spend a year with us to go to other departments. Mm-hmm. So we spend a lot of time having reserve or part-time officers come in, go through our whole training regimen, which is very, very strict. And other towns know that we're a good service. Mm. So when they see someone that's come to Georgetown, gone through their training, they're welcoming them to their departments. So where we don't have the opportunity to hire new full-timers a lot and a lot of turnover, at the full-time level, The part-timers or the assistants are coming in, and then they're leaving. So we're just constantly retraining and rehiring employees to come in, and it's very expensive to do. And their department, like with the part-time, they're doing the same thing. They're not full-time, so the opportunity is not there. So they're coming in as well, getting trained, good training, and then now they opens the doors for them to go elsewhere. So it's become a real issue with us over the last few years.
Well, all their life changes. I've seen that in my time here, where I'll have a pretty steady employee working shifts, pretty steady, regular, and then their life changes, whether they get a full-time job or whether they, go back to school. Well, family commitments, and now I don't see as much of them. So there's the issue of continuity also becomes a challenge as well. And basically, if you look at Georgetown, I'm the only career firefighter. I do it with part-time per diem people.
I see. Okay.
And we're struggling. We're struggling with it.
And what's the size of your department, Chief?
13 full-timers.
Okay.
And right now, 9 reserves of police officers and some civilian dispatch. We do dispatch as well.
Okay. Is that a regional dispatch or
No,
just for all for you? And your fire calls come through?
Yeah. We share dispatch.
We dispatch for police and fire, and in the evenings for all of municipalities.
Okay. And get the last word.
That may be a mistake. Well, first of all, I thank you for being here and presenting this additional funds for our budgeting software. I'm also thankful that we have Governor Bacon, yourself, and Representative Mayor and Senator Tarr as representatives in this area. From as far back as when Jim Lyons was our representative, and Representative Hill was our representative, and now we have Representative Muir. So they have been very easy to work with and have been very helpful to the town. Now, as far as the town goes, 20 or so years ago, Georgetown became a found town. It was a little community. When we moved, my wife and I moved here 40 years ago, it was less than 4,000 people. People used to drive from Beverly and Salem and all over to fill their water jugs up. Well, now we're over 8,000, maybe 8,500 folks. Mm-hmm. It's been a strain on our natural resources. It's been a strain on protecting our conservation land, wetlands. But we live in an era where our infrastructure is maybe close to 100 years old. So now we're at that time when that infrastructure needs to be replaced, and that doesn't come at short dollars. Right. It comes at big dollars.
That's right.
And then moving into the cannabis industry, we are a cannabis-friendly community. There is potential, but as some had mentioned, that there are restrictions in the current statute, which really doesn't allow the communities to utilize those additional revenues in a manner that they see fit. I've talked my brains out trying to move things around to a different way, but we need to have the ability to utilize any revenues that we receive from those companies in a manner that we see fit, and not be restricted to, well, it has to be an impact. I can give you an example. I did talk to the research director of the legislature, and I said, well, explain to me what an impact is, because I can't get that. And they said, well, we're trying not to hamstring the towns. I said, well, we are. I said, let me give you an example. What if we buy a police car? Well, you're buying a police car because that's a direct impact of that business being in the community. Well, how about if the car went bad? Well, then it's not an impact.
I see.
Well, what if we didn't have the car?
Right.
Well, then it's an impact. But it's like nobody can explain it, and it's really very restrictive for the communities to utilize. We have a lot of things coming up with fire. I think first, the police and fire, our first responders, need to be properly outfitted, trained, and staffed because of the severity of the drug crisis. I mean, there are things happen now. They practically should be in hazmat suits when they go out.
We now have a dedicated fund for municipal police training, which is really important, and the fire service has had that before you. And that was just a leveling of the playing field, but really needed to do. So
Some of these things out there now only have to touch your skin and you can be compromised.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, but we have very hard-working department heads and town employees that we get through. Everybody tries to get through on the dollars that we have, and hopefully we get some little extras here and there.
Well, that's a good way to say it. But we want to thank you for your dedication. There's more to do, which is exciting, and we have a good team to work together with. So good luck with your budgets, and hopefully we have a good budget by the end of June to share with you as well. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.